Welcome to our weekly group meeting for the container security group. First one is a demo item from Alexander. Lindsay, do you want to show us this, or I can try to share our agenda as well and just share what he has here?
That would be better if you go ahead and share it, Sam.
Sure. So it looks like Alexander's added the ability to filter, one sec, can now change the alert status from the alert details page. Which is great because before you could only change the status from the main list of alerts. And if you drilled into any of the details, and then if you wanted to change the status, you would actually have to go back to the main page of alerts, find your alert and change the status there. So now if you're drilling in to view the details for an alert, you can adjust the status right here from the details page. So yeah, thanks for that, Alexander. That's a great improvement. I'm glad to see that got through. Tiago put the next item on, but I'm happy to talk through it. Removing the GitLab WAF is planned for breaking change as part of the 14.0 release. And we do have an extra release now between now and then because we'll do a 13.12. But this is one that we've been planning for a while, and I want to make sure that this gets done in time. So I guess the question for this one would be, are there any questions around the requirements here, or is everything clear and are we ready to move this on to refinement? Short summary is we should be taking it out of the product entirely, including all documentation. We should be marking all of our metrics as removed. And we don't want to actually uninstall WAF. Like if we've previously installed WAF into a customer's cluster, we don't want to go out and remove it, but we're not going to be maintaining it or doing anything with it anymore. So that would be a manual step. If they want to remove it, they'll do that themselves, but we're no longer interacting with WAF or installing WAF into the cluster if the pipeline runs again, or we're not doing anything more on our end would be the desired end state for this one. The last item in this is just that, we have done a fair amount of work in WAF. And so it, just being good open source stewards, it makes sense to just post that in a public project somewhere. I think we've done that before with other breaking changes on the secure side. So our plan is just to post what we've done publicly in a public project that we're not going to maintain. But that way it's there in the public domain. If people want to take it or use it or modify it or maintain it, they're more than welcome to do that on their own.
I have a question on that. It's not clear to me what we would be putting as a public, because most of our stuff is integrated with GitLab. So then if we remove the integration with GitLab, how can we just share the integration that was removed or something like that?
So this came as a suggestion from Lucas, I believe. And in the requirements, I think I linked to what he suggested that we include, basically just our default. The way we set it up by default is what he was recommending. That way it's there for historical purposes. So you might want to, we might want to sync up with Lucas. I think he had some ideas of what would be useful for, just preserving for historical context. I think he worked on this originally, setting it up. So honestly, he's probably a better person to clarify that with. But he did link to that code snippet there. So I'm assuming that, it's just the way that we're setting up mod security that he was suggesting that we preserve this default specification. Which it's not like this is, terribly proprietary or earth shattering. This is not like super unique stuff. It's just if users who were going from 13.x to 14.0 wanted to continue maintaining mod security on their own and they wanted to reference our default setup, that might be a nice thing to have, is basically the value that I understand coming from it.
Okay.
Yeah, great questions, Amir. Any other questions on this one? Are we comfortable moving this to refinement?
Yeah, I think if you are clear that we are just going to remove everything and we are not going to consider any kind of backward compatibility with users. For example, if a user is have installed WAF using GMAV1, so now the user is still going to have WAF on the cluster, but there's no indication on GitLab that it has installed or not.
Correct. Yep. So we're removing the feature entirely. A big purpose of removing it is so that we don't end up, continuing to maintain it and having some of the tech debt. I mean, Zamir, you worked on the bugs, right? Like, we've had a pretty steady stream of bugs that have come in from this, and also user requests. Like, we don't support high availability, we don't support DDoS protection, and most enterprise customers already have a WAF in front of their cluster that they're using, like a Cloudflare or some other product. And so it's a little bit hard to justify continuing to invest in this area. So we just want to take it all out. If we do go down this route again, it probably will not be with mod security. We would be looking at options where we do have not only high availability, but also DDoS protection. And it probably would be more of like a front-ended system rather than something inside of the cluster. I think we can do most of what we need to with Cilium inside the cluster.
Okay, and yeah, so basically we are going to remove from GMAV1, we are going to remove from GMAV2, we are going to remove the integration with Elasticsearch, we are going to remove the integration with FluentD. And I think that should do it.
And the statistics page as well. So yeah, there's some UI removals that you should be aware of, Lindsay. Right now it shows up on the statistics page, and it also shows up on GMAV1, but I think there's a broader effort to deprecate and possibly even remove GMAV1. So I don't know if the MRs are going to collide there or not, but we want to at least make sure that our part is fully removed, not just deprecated.
Sounds good.
Great. Since we've got some extra time, I added as a late addition to the agenda item just to discuss Starboard a little bit more. I'm sorry, I don't have a link super handy for that discussion. I can try to pull it up while we talk. But this was recommended to me by the Trivy team, first asynchronously in an issue, and then again when I talked with them synchronously, as a really good way to get Trivy to run against running containers in production. So just wanted to open that up for synchronous discussion. I know we've had some good asynchronous comments on that, but it seems like this could be a really good way to, be able to scan running production images without a whole lot of the other downsides of some of the other things we were considering.
I think 2 points are, like, I have at least one point that I think it's sometimes it gets misunderstood, is that for us to install Starboard into the cluster, we need credentials, right? So if we're going to automate this installation, then it means that we need the famous cluster admin privilege. Unless we just provide like a one-line command that the user runs it. So then we don't need their access; they have already. So that's the philosophy of the agent. The agent is the single line that the user runs it. It's going to deploy the agent in the cluster because the user has that access. But then GitLab doesn't need to have that access.
Right.
So the access need to be there for this kind of operations. There's no way that you can do something like that without privileges, high privileges. So that's one point. So then when you see on Starboard just saying like Starboard init, that's initializing. It's very simple, but that's you need lots of privilege for that.
Sure.
That's one thing. The other thing is that I'm not able to, as much their documentation seems a little bit blurred on if it's scanning containers or if it's scanning images. For me, so far, what I understood is that they can scan the container metadata, and then they get the image that are there, and then they scan the image. That's what I got. But so they have a very fancy way of querying this. And also the results, they create a new resource in Kubernetes, I think called vulnerability report, that this just encapsulate all the results. So I would have to maybe the person that helps us with Trivi, it's very friendly and it's very responsive. I can ping him just to confirm if it install container, if it scans container, live containers. Even if it generates an intermediary image, that's fine. But if it's just a scanning image, I'm not sure how much better that would be from the integration that we have right now.
Yeah.
So then, just to make this clear, we can put this in the Epic or somewhere just to make clear that we are either scanning containers or not.
Yeah, that is an important point because, you know, one of the big goals of this is if an attacker has gained access to that container and they've modified the packages, we want to capture that. And the image that spawned the container is not going to reflect those changes that happened after the container started. And so, you know, that is an important distinction to make. We don't just want to look at it and go back to the image that it came from and scan that image. We actually want to scan the latest and greatest container as it exists now. And whether we scan it live while it's running or whether we, you know, snapshot that container and create a new image to reflect the current state, like that doesn't matter. That's, you know, as long as we're capturing the latest changes that have happened in that container after it started originally, would be the goal there. On your first point, Zamir, is it possible that we can install as part of the agent so that all of that happens together at the same time, or can we use the privileges that we already have in the agent to install Starboard?
That's the thing, that the agent actually doesn't have high privileges. The reason that the agent doesn't require high privileges is that because the user installed the agent. So then as soon as you go to, let's say, Google Cloud or Amazon, and you get that single line that you can run kubectl commands locally. So as soon as you have the kubeconfig set up on your computer, then you have the privilege that you have, let's say admin or cluster admin. So then you can do everything. And then people are comfortable running one line to install things in the cluster.
Right.
People are more comfortable doing that than actually giving this full access to a third-party software that's going to have constant ability to make those changes. That was a trick. So then the agent, after you install the agent, then it has like 5 or 6 privileges just to list pods. It's just very minimum. Sure. That's the difference. And then Starboard is the same. They expect maybe the person that has privilege to just run Starboard in it, and then it's going to spin lots of services in the cluster to do what's supposed to do. And then after that, it's there already. So then now from now on, you still have lots of privilege compared with agent because it's accessing the pods and container, and probably it's going on the Docker level. So then you need way more access than agent requires right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the users would greatly prefer to just run a one-liner versus like the other proposed solution that we've been discussing of scanning images in GitLab's registry. That's quite a lot of setup on their part, because they have to make sure that all of the images that are running in production are also pushed into GitLab's registry. So that's a lot of setup, you know, if they're not doing that already today. If they can just run a one-line command and then be done, that seems like a really good solution to me. It's not as easy as if we install it on our own, but you know, running a one-liner that's not too much to ask, right? Especially like you said, Zamir, I agree. If it means that they don't have to give cluster admin privileges, that's a good solution. Okay, so yeah, I think if we can do this just by requiring them to run a one-liner, that would be a really good solution. We do need to still clarify your second point there, Samir. But I'm just a little bit hesitant to go down the route of scanning images in the GitLab container registry, because for many customers, that's going to be a lot of setup that they don't have in place today. And so I'm meeting with a number of customers. I'm trying to set up a few more customer meetings. I've met with one already. I have another one scheduled for this week. And hopefully I'll get a couple more next week. So I'm trying to double check and see if, pushing everything into the GitLab registry is a solution that will work for them. But I know it's going to be a lot of setup. So the path to adopting that for customers is going to be quite a bit longer than if we can do something that, like a one-liner would be a great solution. That would be very easy for customers to use because they just run it once and they're done. Whereas the GitLab registry solution, they have to make sure that all of their images are always going there. And that's a whole like pipeline process they have to set up and maintain. And they may not be, most customers are not using the GitLab registry today. So that would be a new thing they have to adopt. Has the benefit of pushing them to adopt the GitLab registry. So that's a good thing, but it also means a lot of setup for them. So that's kind of the trade-off.
Marcus, I'm happy. Sorry.
Great. Well, I don't have any other topics to discuss. Lindsay or Zamir, do you have more you want to talk about on this topic or anything else?
Nothing here, Sam.
Yeah, nothing from my side as well.
What about your dog, Zamir? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, if people get close to the door, then it's just panicking. It's a war.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good week.